To understand the heart of Eloisa, you have to understand its form. The story isn't told through a traditional narrator, but through a series of intense, deeply personal letters. It begins with a secret that feels both overwhelming and impossible, a forbidden passion between a young tutor and his pupil, Eloisa. The tutor is a man of lower social standing, and he is completely consumed by a love that defies every rule of his time. His letters are filled with agony. He writes to Eloisa begging her to reject him, not because he doesn't love her, but because he believes that if they stay together, it will destroy them both. He wants to protect her, even if it means his own heartbreak. But Eloisa is caught in a different kind of trap. She speaks of what she calls the tyranny of decorum, while the tutor has the freedom to walk away, to flee her presence and seek a new life. Eloisa is bound by the strict social expectations placed on women. She faces the looming threat of a forced, loveless marriage, and she feels she has no choice but to maintain her reputation at all costs. Their mutual friend, Clara, eventually steps in to act as the architect of their separation. Clara isn't necessarily a villain, but she is a pragmatist. She pressures Eloisa to uphold her honor and convinces the tutor that the only way to save Eloisa's reputation is for him to leave. After they are forced apart, the story shifts from the heat of passion to the cold reality of the aftermath. A man named Lord B, who is quite a pragmatic and manipulative figure, steps in to manage the fallout of this emotional wreckage. To cure the tutor's deep melancholy and give him a sense of purpose, Lord B arranges for him to join a 3-year naval expedition around the world, serving as an engineer. The tutor accepts this mission, but he doesn't see it as a grand adventure. Instead, he views the vast, chaotic ocean as a way to escape his grief, or perhaps as a place where his soul might finally find rest in the waves. He departs, leaving his old life behind for a life of quiet, salt-stained desperation. While the tutor is lost to the sea, the narrative moves into the domestic life of Eloisa, who has since married a man named Mr. Woolmar. This is where the story takes a profound turn from romantic passion to spiritual isolation. On the surface, Eloisa has fulfilled her social duty, but inside there is a massive rift growing between her and her husband. Eloisa is a woman of intense, intuitive piety. Her faith is a living, breathing thing that connects her to the world and to humanity. Mr. Woolmar, however, has undergone a massive intellectual shift. He has moved from atheism to a cold, rigorous skepticism. Through his intense metaphysical inquiries, he has essentially stripped the mystery out of life, creating a vast spiritual distance between himself and his wife. Eloisa finds herself struggling to reconcile her deep, emotional faith with his detached intellectualism. As this rift grows, we also see the character of Mrs. Woolmar, who lives in a state of constant psychological torment. She is carrying a horrid secret, a past deception regarding her husband, which she refuses to ever reveal. She keeps it buried to maintain the peace and respectability of her family, but the weight of it is always there. This theme of hidden truths provides a sharp contrast to Eloisa, whose emotional life is painfully transparent, even when it is suffering. By the end of the story, the characters are left scattered by the very things that were meant to give them order: duty, intellect, and social necessity. The tutor is lost to the vastness of the sea, Mr. Woolmar is lost to the coldness of his own skepticism, and Eloisa is left as a figure of extraordinary sensibility, navigating a world where the laws of the heart are constantly at war with the shackles of society. The passion that started the story hasn't disappeared, it has simply been transformed into a profound, lingering loneliness. When we step back from the raw, bleeding emotion of the letters and look at the architecture of the story, we start to see that Rousseau isn't just writing a romance, he's writing a critique of the cages we build for ourselves. The central tension in the book isn't just between two lovers, but between the laws of the heart and what the characters call the tyranny of decorum. This isn't just about being polite or following social rules, it's about the way society demands that we perform a version of ourselves that denies our actual nature. You can see this most clearly in the way the characters are allowed to react to their pain. There's a profound, almost unfair, gendered disparity in how passion is handled. When the tutor is consumed by his grief and his desire, he is given the agency to move. He can board a ship, sail across the world, and seek out a life of action to drown his melancholy. He has the freedom of movement, even if that movement is just a way to run away from his own soul. But Eloisa is trapped by a different kind of gravity. For a woman in her position, the only way to maintain dignity and social standing is to maintain a serene countenance. She has to look composed and virtuous even while she is experiencing an internal catastrophe. Her struggle is the struggle of being forced to wear a mask of calm while your entire world is on fire. This theme of masks and facades continues into the second half of the book, specifically through the contrast between Eloisa and Mrs. Woolmar. While Eloisa is painfully, almost destructively transparent with her emotions, Mrs. Woolmar represents the quiet, heavy cost of social respectability. She lives with a horrid secret, a piece of her past that she refuses to reveal, not because she wants to be dishonest, but because she wants to preserve the peace and the reputation of her family. This creates a fascinating tension. Is it more virtuous to be honest about your suffering, like Eloisa, or to lie to maintain the stability of the social order, like Mrs. Woolmar? Rousseau seems to suggest that both paths lead to a kind of isolation. One is isolated by the intensity of her feelings, and the other is isolated by the weight of her secrets. Then there is the intellectual rift that develops in the marriage between Eloisa and Mr. Woolmar. This is perhaps the most modern part of the book. It's not a conflict of passion, but a conflict of perception. As Mr. Woolmar moves from atheism to skepticism, he isn't just changing his religious views, he's changing the very way he experiences reality. He moves toward a cold, rigorous intellectualism that leaves no room for the intuitive, emotional piety that Eloisa relies on to survive. This creates a profound spiritual loneliness. It's one thing to be separated from a lover by distance or social class, but it's quite another to be sitting in a room with your spouse and realizing that you no longer inhabit the same universe. His skepticism creates a void where her faith used to be, leaving her to navigate her devotion in a house that has become intellectually hollow. Rousseau also uses the metaphor of natural education to drive home his critique of these social structures. There's this idea that humans are born with a natural, beautiful way of being, but that society, with its complex rules and religious dogmas, acts like a gardener who prunes away everything that doesn't fit a specific artificial shape. The characters are essentially being pruned. The tutor is pruned away from his passion and sent to sea, Eloisa is pruned of her agency and forced into a domestic role, and Mr. Woolmar is pruned of his intuition by the cold tools of logic. In the end, the tragedy of Eloisa isn't just that the lovers can't be together. The real tragedy is the way every character is ultimately driven into a state of profound loneliness by the very things meant to give their lives structure, duty, marriage, intellect, and reputation. Whether they are lost to the vastness of the ocean or the silence of a skeptical household, they all end up isolated. The book leaves us with the unsettling thought that perhaps the more we try to satisfy the requirements of society and the demands of reason, the further we drift from the actual, messy, and beautiful truth of our own hearts.